Hello, my name is Eva and I run the account Notation is Great on Twitter. So today I'm going to cover some of the notations of the so-called Ars Subtilior. So what is Ars Subtilior? Well, it's a school in medieval music, so from the late 14th century, and it comes after the Ars Antiqua and Ars Nova, so old art and new art, and then you've got Ars Subtilior, which basically means the most subtle art or something like that. And it's important to know that these names were given to these different schools of composition by contemporary musicologists. So it's not as if the composers in the Middle Ages called themselves that, but it's rather a sort of attempt at making sense of the different currents, different styles in medieval music. And Ars Subtilior has that name because the music was very sophisticated. So it's a time where the music becomes a bit manneristic. Even there's a lot of concern with searching the most subtle, the most intelligent, the wittiest kinds of things. And this might have to do, for example, with how the text and the music are connected and so on. So this is an example of a score in Ars Subtilior, so you might be familiar with this. This is Baud Cordier two-part compa, which translates as I am all written by compass, and I'll talk more about that later. In terms of clefs, staff, note values, the notation of Ars Subtilior is pretty much the same as Ars Nova, okay? And I will make a video about Ars Nova notation. But what I wanted to talk about today is how Ars Subtilior takes this witty, clever, subtle approach to even how scores look like, okay? So I talked earlier about how there's this communion sometimes between the text and the music, and sometimes this extends even to the score. So the score is meant to be not only visually pleasing, but also it's meant to draw attention to aspects of the music and aspects of the text. So this is not the case, I have to say, with all of the Ars Subtilior, but it is typical of the Ars Subtilior, so to speak. It's part of this kind of mindset. So this is a perpetual canon, okay? So it means you can go on and on forever. So the form of a circle seems quite fitting here. And if you look at the four kind of boxes on the sides, these are the different stanzas, okay? If we have a closer look at the score, you can see this circle with a horizontal line in the middle. This is meant to indicate the entries to the canon, okay? And you will also see that the color switches between black and red notes. So red basically means a change in the meter, okay? But I'll talk more about that when I talk about Ars Nova in another video. So this is another piece by Baud Cordier. By the way, it's the Codex Chantilly as well, which is one of the main for this type of notation. Belle, bonne, sage, so beautiful, good, and clever. So this is, as you might have guessed from the title, this is a love song. So it's a song of praise for the lover of the poet. So this heart-shaped score is perhaps quite appropriate here, isn't it? So here we have the two upper lines, which are this kind of undulated shape. They are the upper voice. And then in a kind of more horizontal shape, we have the tenor, and it's clearly indicated as tenor. And again, you can see the switch from black to red notes, which, as I said, it means like a different type of meter. So this is another piece from the Chantilly Codex, and you might say, well, this doesn't look exciting, this doesn't look particularly interesting. It's true, but then you have the same piece in another codex here, and this does look a bit more interesting. Okay, so this is from the Beinecke library, and the piece is La Harpe de Mélodie by Jacob Senlesche, so the harp of melody, and it's notated in the form of a harp. Okay, and it's quite useful to have another version of this piece in the Chantilly Codex, because obviously it means we can compare both pieces and we can figure out how the kind of more impressionistic version is notated. So if we have a look at the harp here, you'll see that the strings of the harp actually work as the staff, but this staff does seem to have a lot of lines, doesn't it? Yeah, and also if you look a bit more closely, you see that there are no notes on the spaces, just on the lines themselves. So basically what's happened here is that the scribe has skipped the spaces. So for example, if the note on the first line is C, then the first space is skipped and the D is going to be on the second line. So obviously you need a larger number of lines to notate the same piece, if that makes sense. So this obviously makes the score a bit tricky to read, it's a bit difficult to read, but we have to bear in mind that obviously the main goal here is the visual, the kind of aesthetically pleasing experience. It's not so much to be able to read easily because, I mean, as I said, we also have the other more conventional notation. And there's another thing here, which is that you can probably see a banner which is wrapped on one side of the harp, yeah, and it's got some text on it in red. Well, basically, this is a 3-voice piece, okay, but only the 2 upper voices are notated. So that banner here gives you instructions to derive the 3rd voice from the existing voices, okay? So that's another way in which the scribe or the composer has given us this kind of impression of cleverness and wit and so on. So there's this 3rd voice which is kind of hidden in a way. So this was my very brief introduction to Ars Subtilior, and it is perhaps not the most practical way of notating music. I mean, can you imagine having to rotate the manuscript again and again to read the canon and so on? But it's of course very pleasing to look at. It's also part of this very interesting culture, full of allusions, full of subtlety. So I think it's worth having a look at all of these scores. Anyway, I hope you've learned something from this video. Thanks for watching and goodbye.